Every Sunday in April, I led a series called Trust the Struggles and making peace with the 5 obstacles or the 5 hindrances. And so I want to explore that some more with you all, and with the intention of helping us see how we uh, might blame ourselves for not, I don't know, blame ourselves. This is what happens a lot. I love Buddhism philosophy, the way I see it as it's harms reduction. So that's my approach as um, as a healer, is really about harms reduction. So how do I reduce the harm in my life and then help people get in touch with their healing? And we need to see how the harm gets lodged into our behaviors and our feelings and thoughts and physical sensations, and how can we reduce that harm. And the list of the 5 hindrances are a way we get stuck and get us out of the moment. And the reality is that they're always part of the moment, and they're a part of the path of healing and awareness, and the healing that comes from awareness. So I'm going to share my screen and just a few slides of these 5 hindrances. And the first one that I like talking about is doubt. Usually that's listed as last, but I go to that one first, and I'll let you all know why in a moment. I'll just read these other ones. Ill will or hatred, and so listlessness or sloth and torpor is one of the translations. And then the 4th one, restlessness and worry. And the 5th one is sense desire. And I start with doubt because it can really shut down our practice. So I have a picture of here of what one of the similes of the Buddha was said to have said. These metaphors are similes for the mind being luminous and clear when we are awake to the moment. Yet these hindrances, in this one specifically, doubt, the mind turns, instead of the kind of luminous, clear pool, it can become muddy, where we can't see the bottom of the pool, the bottom of where the clear water is. And I think it's so important to talk about this one first, because it's the one that really shuts down our practice. And it involves an absence of a spiritual kind of confidence in, as I see it, like really trusting your present moment experience. And the second point here is around skepticism. So where there's actually healthy skepticism, and according to Buddhism, there's a phrase that says, the word's not coming to me, but basically see for yourself. So it's really important to have a healthy skepticism, to really see what works for your life in this current time, to really, really see what makes sense for you in terms of practicing. And I'll relate to the other hindrances on how we avoid being with things as they are. But this doubt is so muddy, and it's cognitive dissonance is another term I like to relate to doubt. And it's in an updated sort of term for the cognitive science, the way we distort our reality. And cognitive dissonance, one way to describe it is that we have beliefs, we all have beliefs, and that there's something that happens and it doesn't mesh well with our feelings, and it creates a dissonance. And our tendency is just to go to what makes us feel comfortable. Um, and it's not right or wrong, and yet it takes us out of seeing the fullness of our experience. And not that we could ever see it perfectly, because things are changing all the time, but to see doubt for what it is, this muddy water, like this sense of not knowing where we're going. and and then we start to see the doubt in the world too, the sense of I feel like a kind of epidemic of mistrust, of not feeling a sense of certainty of where things are going. And to me, that's what meditation is really about, is to connect to this confidence within yourself, to know yourself as well as you can. Again, knowing that we're actually changing all the time, and noticing that tendency to come back to what some might call our ego. But even that's not bad per se. That's what I appreciate about Buddhism. It's not really so much a moralizing, but really, again, seeing what really makes sense to you, what makes sense to you and your practice and where you're at. And also knowing, though, that it's not an individual experience per se, because we are all connected. So that's why in the beginning I kept on coming back to like really touching into this sangha, this connectedness, and really thanking you all, appreciating me and you for showing up to this, because that begins to allow this mud on the water to settle, and then that we can see see things more clearly and see where we're going. And yeah, so I will go on to the next hindrance of ill will. So the metaphor, the simile for this one is boiling water. And ill will is a spectrum from aversion. So this kind of a light, just like pushing away, like not wanting something. And we do it on the most subtle levels. Even we have an itch and we go automatically to scratch it. So that's like a example of aversion. And so this constant pushing away of things, and annoyance. And then there's more compelling experiences of ill will, like hatred and malevolence and vengefulness and rage. And anger. Yeah, this is anger is somewhere, as I see it, in the middle of this spectrum of ill will. And anger, to be clear, is really important. It's usually a sign that there's an injustice happening. I think it's so important, though, to see how we've internalized it. Um, someone mentioned getting in touch with grief, and I just think of the grief of having been taught that I'm not lovable, or that I'm not fully human for being different, and the really mean things, ill will, um, sentiments that were told to us by people that our families, the people that, and when we came out, or this, we all have these stories, and to see how those leave their scars, right, their traumas, and where the pain becomes so much that we have the tendency to try to um, push it down and not acknowledge it, or projectile, like vomit it to other people. And there's a teaching that many of you probably heard of around in Buddhism, like the hot coal, like of ill will, of like of having anger, resentment towards somebody, anger, and like who's getting burned, right? Because we're holding the hot coal, and how to really go into our experience and see where we hold on to this anger that's that burns us up on the inside. And the antidote for this one, so for doubt is, and I'll list the antidotes in a moment, but generally for doubt, it's faith and committing to your practice. For ill will, it's this loving kindness practice, because we can't dispel hate with hate. That doesn't work, yeah. And but it's so painful to look at those scars, and those scars, those traumas at different times in our lives, sometimes on a daily basis, arise like boiling water and want our attention, and we usually push them down, and it's good to be able to contain them and put them in boxes, these triggering, but at some point it needs space, and I trust in the practice enough that if I'm resourced enough, if I'm within this window of tolerance around being able to uh, breathe in and create space for what is arising, and be able to breathe out and to let go and let be, that these re-triggerings are an opportunity to integrate and heal the trauma. So I have a deep trust in that, and but that it doesn't happen alone, that we need to be resourced both internally and externally. The third one of sloth and torpor is like a pool that's stagnant, growth of algae, and so it's a sluggishness, a dullness of mind, lack of energy, and no rigor. I saw this definition in a website called Access to Insight, which is a really good resource for some OG translations on some of the suttas, the transcriptions of the Buddha's teachings. And so no rigor to perform dana. And so this is really interesting in that we might know, like, one of the true causes of happiness is to be of service. And when we're able to give what we have and leave ourselves open to receive dana, that really helps this obstacle to dissolve, because it does feel like a thick depression. The next one is restlessness and worry or anxiety. And I always kind of normalize our experience around depression and anxiety. And I say, if you're not anxious or depressed, then I start to worry about folks, because there's enough suffering to elicit these mood states. And though it's so important, of course, if it's at any sense of feeling uncontrollable, to get professional support, but right now there's so much access to information that's a lot of misinformation, I think, yeah, but just a lot of information in general, that it could be really exhausting. So this is where it's an obstacle, is that we're not aware of how we're expending our energy. This is the dana, this generosity, like we are not being generous to ourselves by taking breaks from wanting to not feel aversion and not feel pain, and where we get stuck, and for might seem like no reason, and sometimes it is, and but to be able to recognize that, oh, I feel like sluggish, I feel, you know, tired, and for most of us, it's it's happening a lot, and and to recognize that there is a lot of collective trauma and grief happening, and but trying to see though that we don't add to the suffering when we're with this low energy mood state. And then I might see this one, this restlessness and worry, this fourth hindrance, as the opposite, sort of like the gas pedal, and then the sloth and torpor is sort of like the brake pedal. And so that I often feel like I'm pressing both of them at the same time and not going anywhere. But and I think that's skillful sometimes. But this restlessness and worry is this. You've heard the phrase of doing too much. And this can be a way to avoid being in the moment, the constant, like working a lot, or just doing too much of something, and as a way to avoid the moment. And sloth and torpor could be a way to avoid the moment too, where I've been on longer retreats where I just was sleeping the whole time, and like in fantasy the whole time. And it was because I was avoiding being with whatever was arising in the moment. And so with this restlessness and worry has this past and the future orientation. When we're stuck in the future orientation, it's anxiety, or I like calling them disaster fantasies and catastrophizing. And the reality is that one of my favorite phrases in Buddhism is practice don't know mind. Like, who knows the future, So practicing don't know mind, but it doesn't mean to not, see the patterns that are evident, but to notice when we are catastrophizing and predicting the future. Um, and that's a way to avoid the moment. Yeah. And it could be a trauma trying to get our attention. Yeah. And then restlessness and worry, like about the past. So this sadness because something that we did in the past, and it's sort of like this regret that we get stuck in. So that's also important to notice. And the word right now is like forgiveness, like forgiving the past, um, and then forgiving the future, because we all will make mistakes. We know that there'll be suffering, and the simile for this one is like a wind blowing on the surface of the water. So that's the picture here of a restless, turbulent water. But the reality is under the water, there's still that luminous mind, but that the surface is being agitated. So sometimes I just learned how to swim. Some of you may know as an adult, I've told this story before. And instead of freaking out and just like batting the water frenetically, one of the things to do is to lie on your back and float. So when this restlessness and worry obstacle is arising, it can be really helpful to maybe lie on the ground, that will definitely shift the energy. And wait till the water settles, and then you can make a decision with a clearer mind. And the more and more we make wise decisions, it builds trust and confidence in our practice. And then the fifth one here in this list is the sense desire. And the picture here is of someone buys dyes to color bodies of water. Thanks capitalism. But the original teaching around this is it is like dyeing the the, the water, the mind with colors. Yeah, and um, and so some of the ways to describe sense desires, craving or thirst, um, and thirst traps, I'll just say, on the socials. Desire, longing. Again, none of this is morally bad, but it's just noticing that we this kind of goes with the ill will hindrance. The ill will is sort of pushing away, and the sense desire is like wanting. It's greed and wanting to feel good all the time. And this is my favorite picture that I found to represent kind of the sense desire. This is like self-care, times 1,000, of just the sort of exorbitant ways we might indulge in our senses. Again, it's not bad. We want to connect to our senses and really appreciate, because that's the way we take in the world. Yet there's ways that there's 3 types of sense desire. This kind of craving for pleasures, even though we know they won't last forever, and then craving for existence. So like denying death and wanting to live forever, and then craving for non-existence. So sort of like not wanting to live on an extreme of annihilation, or wanting to get rid of any sort of thing that might cause discomfort. So I mentioned the senses, and so in Buddhism there's 6 senses: the eyes and the visible form, and ears and sound, nose and odors, tongue and flavors, body and tangible objects, and then the mind and mental objects. So the mind, that's the interesting thing. These sense doors or sense spheres, they're the ways we take in the world. There aren't any other ways. And that these doors are very conditioned. These spheres are very influenced by, of course, early experiences in our lives, and also, and in good ways, so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel and say, oh, what is that big brown, like there's wood and it's a tree, and so but to know that we are influencing our whole experience by being aware or not being aware of what we're taking in to our sense doors. And so at any time in our days, we can practice meditation when we're noticing what is happening through these sense doors, and how to conserve our energy. That's been my mantra throughout this pandemic and the multiple pandemics of the isms, right? Of living in a culture that has a lot of suffering, and of course, the wholesome side of this is the joys too. That to take the joys in of our one precious life through these sense doors as well, and that's necessary to keep us on the path. And these sense spheres, like everything, they're changing all the time, and that over time we can start to recondition our ways of being in the world, and then that we're not causing more harm to ourselves and others. So the Satipatthana is a book, one of in Buddhism, that lists the ways to overcome these hindrances or to work with these hindrances. And I'll just go through them quickly because I don't, some of us are, um, might be aligned intellectually, but I just, especially for um, really smart folks like we are, like not getting so attached to the words and doing this right, especially if we're not connected to our bodies habitually, and that generally comes with having a lot of privilege that of not feeling somatically in ways that are wise and through these sense doors, but really questioning what you know all the time and just trusting what you know. So that's working with doubt and being ethical, because we might not feel in this perfectionistic dominator culture, dehumanizing, that we might think we're not doing enough. But knowing your ethics is and your values is really, really important. Committing to a practice is essential to working with doubt. And you'll see every one of these lists as good friends and suitable conversation. Again, for ill will, meditating on loving kindness, considering your karma, like that karma means action. So every action will have an influence on the world. So really being aware of that, and really repeating that wise consideration, balancing wisdom with compassion, and knowing that no one wants to suffer. And why would we add any more suffering to the world? Sloth and torpor. It says lessening food intake, and that's a lot of Buddhism I want to call out for being like written for monastic people. So holding a lot of things lightly, and so especially in a culture that is very influenced by shaming us for being in larger bodies per se, or diet culture as a form of um, of um, of suffering, and so yeah, Slav changing meditation, being outside, cognition of the light in you, and um, and again, this good friends and suitable conversation is on everyone. And so questioning the discourses for this restlessness and worry, and again, being this ethical conduct and visiting experienced elders. So gray hair does not make an elder. It could be a little kid that shows you like how to get out the wiggles and that extra energy that anxiety is, and to also talk to folks that have more experience than you. And the sense desire, really knowing how our senses are really highly conditioned to what we think is beautiful, and really just appreciating your body and its simplicity, and and it says unattractiveness of your body, and that is a deep practice that I've done on longer retreats, and really just to focus on the body and its kind of in its gross sense, not bad or wrong, but and then guarding our senses, again, these sense doors, and um, moderating our food. And part of moderation is like really enjoying your food, enjoying, if you're gonna have it, enjoy it, is what I say. And then this good friends and suitable conversation. So that's the 5 hindrances, and they're part of the path, and they're just there's categories to be aware of. So when we're aware of them, we're actually practicing. We're in the moment.